The night I finally said no didn't start with courage. It started with exhaustion, not the kind you fix with sleep, but the kind that settles deep in your body when you've been bending yourself for too long. The kind that comes from explaining, adjusting, and staying quiet until you barely recognize your own reactions anymore. Nothing about that night looked important at first. The room was familiar. The tone of his voice was familiar. Even the conversation followed a pattern I knew by heart. That was the problem. If this story is touching you, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. For a long time, I believed that strength meant endurance. That if I could stay calm, stay reasonable, stay quiet, then I was doing the right thing. I told myself that reacting would only make things worse, that speaking up would create conflict I wasn't prepared to handle. So I learned how to absorb things. I absorbed dismissive comments by telling myself they weren't intentional. I absorbed decisions made without me by convincing myself they were practical. I absorbed discomfort by pretending it didn't matter. At first, these moments felt small, easy to justify, easy to let go, but they accumulated slowly, almost invisibly, until I was carrying more than I realized. And he grew comfortable with that. He didn't need to raise his voice or demand control. He simply assumed I would adjust, assumed I would understand, assumed I would agree, even before asking. And most of the time, I did. Not because I truly agreed, but because saying no felt heavier than living with the consequences of saying nothing. Until that night, the conversation was ordinary. He was explaining something he had already decided, something that affected both of us. His tone suggested finality, not discussion. He spoke with the kind of confidence that comes from never being challenged. I listened, nodding automatically, already preparing the familiar response, the softened version of my truth, the one that kept things smooth. But as he spoke, I felt something different, not confusion, not fear, clarity, a quiet, steady clarity that startled me. I realized I didn't need more time to think. I didn't need more information. I wasn't unsure. I simply didn't agree. That realization felt heavier than anything else in the room. He finished speaking and paused, waiting for my response. That pause carried an expectation, the same one it always did, that I would say yes or something close enough to it. For a brief moment, I almost did. Old habits are persuasive. I could already hear myself saying, "It's fine." Even though it wasn't, I could feel the reflex to minimize my discomfort rising automatically. But then another thought surfaced, clear and unavoidable. If I don't say no now, I never will. That thought didn't come with panic. It came with calm. So I took a breath. Not to steady my nerves, but to commit. And I said it. No, just one word. Not loud, not emotional, not dramatic. The effect was immediate. He looked at me as if he hadn't heard correctly. For a second, he smiled, like I was joking or misunderstanding him. "What do you mean?" he asked. "I mean no," I said. "I'm not okay with that." The silence that followed felt thick, almost physical. He wasn't used to resistance from me, especially not delivered so calmly. He responded the way he always did, explaining, reframing, minimizing. He told me why it made sense, why it wasn't a big deal, why I was probably overthinking things. Normally, that would have worked, but something had shifted. As he spoke, I felt myself step back, not emotionally, but internally. I stopped absorbing his words as instructions and started hearing them as arguments. And arguments only work if you engage. "I'm not changing my mind," I said when he finished. That sentence landed differently. It wasn't defensive. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't negotiable. That was the moment he realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a boundary. His expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. Confusion flickered first, followed by irritation disguised as patience. He tried a different approach, softening his tone, framing his point as concern, as logic, as something that would ultimately be best for everyone. I listened fully. And then I said no again. That was the moment my night changed. Not because I raised my voice, not because I won the argument, but because I stopped participating in a dynamic that only worked when I complied. The room felt different after that unbalanced. He noticed it too. When someone is used to control, calm resistance feels unsettling. The conversation ended without resolution. No agreement, no apology. Just an uneasy quiet that followed us as we moved apart. Later, when I was alone, the delayed reaction hit me all at once. My heart raced, my thoughts spiraled. Doubt rushed in fast. Had I gone too far? Had I changed something I couldn't undo? Would this come back to hurt me? These questions were familiar. They were the same ones that had kept me quiet for so long. But beneath them was something new. Relief. For the first time, I hadn't betrayed myself to keep the peace. I hadn't crossed my own boundary just to make things easier for someone else. I had stayed with myself. The days that followed weren't easy. Saying no once doesn't undo years of silence. The dynamic didn't disappear, it resisted. He tested the boundary. Subtly at first, then more directly. Each time, I felt the familiar pull to explain myself, to soften, to retreat. And each time, I chose not to. No, that doesn't work for me. I'm not agreeing to that. Each response made the shift more visible. I realized something important. Power doesn't disappear when you stop giving it away. It simply returns to where it belongs. As it returned, I felt steadier, less reactive. I stopped rehearsing conversations in my head. I stopped anticipating reactions that weren't mine to manage. I wasn't louder. I was grounded. The most surprising part wasn't how he reacted, it was how I did. I didn't feel guilty the way I expected to. I didn't feel responsible for fixing the discomfort. I understood then that discomfort wasn't a sign I was wrong. It was a sign that something had changed. That night didn't make me fearless. It made me clear. Clear about what I would accept. Clear about what I wouldn't. Clear about where I ended and others began. And that clarity changed everything. If you're rewatching this and you're afraid of what might happen if you finally say no, know this. The fear isn't about the word itself. It's about what you'll stop tolerating once you use it. The night I finally said no wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it changed the balance forever.